back to the Health and Social Care Business Podcast by TGPC, where we explore the business development of health and social care services in the UK. Joining us today, we have Lisa Brown, who is making waves in the world of supported living property developments. Lisa is a former nurse, transitioned into property development after encountering challenges in developing properties for supported living. Her extensive nursing career spans 23 years across various settings, including the emergency department and as a health visitor. Throughout her nursing journey, she witnessed firsthand the profound impact housing quality had on individuals' health and well-being. And this is what has led her on this journey. Thank you so much, Lisa, for joining us today.
Oh, thank you for having me. It's great to be here. Thank you.
So Lisa, could we start by differentiating between supported living accommodation and services? And what is the relationship between the two? This is because sometimes there's a bit of a confusion between offering supported living as a service and actually providing the accommodation.
It's really tricky, isn't it? Because there's a lot of grey areas in all of this stuff to do with supported living. It's not clear cut that this is exactly how it goes.
Absolutely.
But I think for a lot of providers, they're delivering the support, the care, the service to the people, to the tenants in the property who have a support need, whatever that support need happens to be. So to me, that I call that the supported living service delivered by a supported living provider. Obviously, some of it's supported accommodation and some of it is, but that's essentially it. And then you have the property side of things. So they can be completely separate. So we have a lot of providers who work on a lease-based model. They don't own any properties themselves. They run a brilliant care company or a brilliant support company, but what they need is properties for people to live in. So they will lease those properties from a property investor or a property owner or someone else who owns that property. Sometimes it's a housing association. And so there can be complete separation, but the grey area comes in that some of those supported living providers will have their own properties themselves. So they may own a property themselves, or they may actually decide they want to buy a property. So it's not completely clear cut, and it depends what sector that you're delivering the support in, because some regulators are happy with you having owning the property. Say Ofsted, they don't mind if you own the property too. In some ways, they quite like it. Whereas CQC, the Care Quality Commission, if you're doing regulated services, but with personal care, they don't like you to own the properties yourself. Yes. They like to see that separation between the care and the tenancy. So it's not a straightforward answer, I'm afraid, Obi, but I hope that helped.
Absolutely. So for providers looking to go into the space, it's important to do research. So if you're going to provide services to young people, then you'll be regulated by Ofsted and you can actually own the property. But if you're going to provide services to adults, then you might want to look into rent to rent or leasing, because most of the time, CQC, like you said, they don't really like companies to own both the properties and the services. And that's why they have to be both separate. So thank you so much. So within supported living value chain, who are the key stakeholders when it comes to supported living accommodation? Who are the partners at service providers who perhaps want to do a rent to rent or maybe even work with Ofsted? Who are the key partners and that they could collaborate with?
So if you're you're providing the support service, you need to have a good relationship with the local authority, don't you? You need to make sure you're going to get referrals. You're going to make sure that you've got that good relationship with the local authority, with the commissioner, whoever's in charge of making sure you get those referrals, because there's no point going any further if you're going to get a property and not be able to fill it. So you need to make sure that you've done all the relevant things you can on your side to make sure you're in a position to receive those referrals, whether it's that you're on the framework, the DPS, whatever it is called in your area. You need to make sure you've got that. So that's the really key one, I think, before you get any further. And you need to make sure you've got all your regulatory stuff in place, don't you? So that you are able to get onto that framework, you're in a position to receive those referrals. And you've got all your processes and protocols and all of those things. But then when it comes to the property side of things, then I think it's about finding a property investor. If you're looking to lease that property, it's about finding property investors who are going to work with you. So it's about building relationships with those property investors so you can actually get hold of the properties that you need.
Yeah, I feel building relationships is key, because a lot of times providers, it's a bit like the chicken and egg, which comes first? Do you go on the framework or do you get the house? And this is where building a relationship and having an investor that could trust you and you could trust them is key. That's what I'm thinking, because a lot of times,
I agree. Relationships, all of this, all of business, all of healthcare, everything is about relationships, isn't it?
Absolutely.
It's so essential. But I do see a lot of people getting properties too early. And if you're a new provider, it's something that worries me. I think I'm seeing people leasing
Yes.
properties, getting excited. They're going, I've got a property, I've got a property. They've signed for a lease for a property. It might be the wrong kind of property. They don't really know because they're so early in their journey. They've
Yeah,
signed a lease for that property. They've got this property. They don't really know what to do with it. And then when they start getting referrals, which might be 6 months, 12 months down the line, they've
absolutely.
used all of that money they've saved to set up their service on paying rent for 6 months, 12 months. So it's really key to get that timing right about finding the property.
And building that relationship.
Yeah, absolutely. It's really important.
Yeah. So you have a lot of experience in property investments, specifically supported living properties. Could you tell us what differentiates conventional property investments from supported living investments? This is for potential investors.
So essentially, it's the same process. You're taking a property, you're finding some way to add value to that property as a property investor, whether that's that you're buying a property that's in a state and you're doing it up and adding value to it that way, or maybe you've got finding other opportunities, a way of increasing the value of the property through that process of buying it. So that's what most property investors do. It's just that your end user is maybe not a standard private rental tenant, it might be a supported living provider. So
Yes.
essentially, the property side of it isn't terribly different. What is different is understanding the process. And so it's understanding who those different people, if you're a property investor, it's understanding who you're working with, it's understanding who's leasing your property, how they get their funding, how you make the decision that they're a good provider to lease your property to, and not someone who's not going to pay you the money, who's not
Yes.
going to get the referrals. There's a lot of stuff to kind of get your head around and understand. And there are some challenges if you're a property investor leasing to supported living providers, because you can't use a standard buy-to-let mortgage. Your mortgage has to be able to allow you to have supported living tenants. And that is a little bit more complicated to get hold of. There are products out there, mortgage products out there, but they're not quite as straightforward to obtain. And also the same with insurance. So you do need to make sure you have specialist insurance and specialist mortgages that are going to allow you to lease your property to a supported living provider. And that's one of the big differentiators, I think, is understanding your end user. So where you might need to do slightly different level of adaptation because of the tenants who are going to be living in the property. It might be that you need to be
Absolutely.
an accessible wet room, mightn't you? Or you might need to put in some additional CCTV or a different door entry system, something like that you might be required to add. So there's a slight variation there as well.
Yeah, again, this goes back to the relationship building because we had a client who came to us once who was looking for a property. And we don't obviously, we're not property investors, but they came to us seeking advice saying they've approached a property owner and they refused to lease the property to them because they were not really sure how the business works.
Yeah.
Even though they agreed to pay 12 months rent in advance, they still didn't have that confidence. So I do feel there's a bit of room for people or potential investors to be a bit more aware of both the end users and the service providers. That this is a space where, yes, you may not know very much how it works, but the risk factor is lower. And this is again where the relationship building comes in. When you have the relationship, you can get to know them, they can open up the books, they can tell you a bit more. So just to echo what you were saying, yes.
And as a provider, that's almost your job, is to sell this great thing you're offering to a property investor. You're
Yes,
offering them a hands-free way to hold their property for the long term. So it's definitely worth thinking about that pitch that you're going to come up with to your property investors.
absolutely. As this is the Health and Social Care Business Podcast, could you explain the business of supported living accommodation to individuals, companies, or investors looking to enter this space?
It's tricky, isn't it? Because my pitch would be slightly different to each of those groups, so I'm not quite sure
Okay.
which one. But I guess it's if you're thinking about it from a property investor perspective, I sell this as a great way to hold property for the long term. It's a really
Okay.
good way. You can hold property. Most landlords and property investors who've been investors for a little while are tired of tenants. They're fed up of managing tenants. And as a provider, you're offering them this great opportunity where they can hold their property for the long term without having to manage tenants. You're just going to receive the money every month from you guys as a provider leasing the property.
Yes.
So it's a fairly easy sell, really, to property investors. you need to get them on board and you need them to understand what you're doing. But once they realize, actually, you'll find, well, we're beginning to see that now. It's switching around. We're beginning to see property investors going, oh, actually, I'd really like to lease my property to you guys. Whereas in the past, it was like, oh, no,
Yes.
I don't really want to do that. I don't really understand it. I don't want things
Yes.
like that in my property. Now it's beginning to switch around and people going, oh, yeah, I'll have a bit of that. Thanks. Yeah.
Yeah, yes, absolutely. I've seen the changes as well because initially it was so difficult to get properties, and now all of a sudden people are actually looking for supported living.
Yeah.
And it's a great thing. It's not just about the leasing of the property, is what it stands for as well.
Mm.
You're creating this space where people can have a choice and they can live independently. So there's that social value aspect of it as well, which is a bit more than your regular rent to rent.
Yeah.
So social impact investors would also be quite interested in initiatives like, well, yes, in approaches like this.
I think we've seen that since COVID, particularly, that people are a bit more concerned about how they're making their money as well. That social impact
Yes.
is more important to people. And yeah, I definitely have seen big changes in the last few years in people jumping into supported living. Almost, and I thought I'd never say this, almost too much, to the point people are jumping in and not really understanding it. So we're getting people leasing properties when they don't have compliant mortgages or don't understand the insurance and the regulations that they need to take part in. So it's almost gone a little bit too far the other way, but there'll be a balance somewhere in there.
Yes, somewhere eventually. Okay, so the SLP, which is the Supported Living Property Network, connects property investors with supported living providers. In your experience as the director, have you observed a difference in the level of interest from investors within the health and social care sector compared to others outside the sector? And what factors do you feel might be influencing these decisions or these differences? And who is a typical supported living investor?
Interesting. So I don't think there is a typical supported living property investor. I think a lot of what we're seeing is, like we said earlier, people looking for a little bit more social impact in their investing.
Yeah.
And I think it's people motivated by the right reasons often. But we are also seeing a lot of people, and they've always been around in this space, who are here purely for the money, who see it as a good way to make money, and perhaps are going to be less concerned about the quality of the property delivered to the end user. So I think
Yeah.
we see that mixed bag of different, property investors here. I think there's been a lot of pressure on landlords and property investors. There's been a lot of policy changes by the government. There've been increased taxations, the way that properties are taxed, property investments are taxed, and we're seeing new regulations coming in all the time. And I think a lot of property investors are feeling slightly under attack at the moment. They're feeling like actually they, particularly ones who are doing a good job, feel like
Yeah.
they're getting attacked and more and more prices and costs being laid upon them by the government. So
Yeah.
we've seen an awful lot of private property investors exiting, and that's part of the reason that we've got a real shortage of private rental property at the moment in this country.
Okay.
So I think what we're seeing is a lot of tired landlords going, do you know what, I can make more money just investing my little pot of savings into the stock market than I could holding a property, and I wouldn't have all this hassle of tenants and the government telling me I'm doing this wrong and that wrong. So I think in that light of that, as a supported living provider, you've got a really good opportunity to sell what you're offering, like I said earlier, to these hired landlords and say, look, I can take over this property for you. You're not going to be managing tenants. Let me make your life easier for you, and that's a really good opportunity for you guys to get involved at the moment.
Oh, brilliant. So typical investors would be companies or investment companies with portfolios with heavily social, would you say social impact investors?
Right now, I think you'll find that just anybody. So a lot of people want one or two properties just because to boost their pensions. We're not necessarily, everyone has an image of a property investor driving a Lamborghini, wearing a Rolex,
Yeah.
swanning off to the Caribbean all the time. And actually, the majority of property investors that you meet have two or three properties, and they might be a teacher, they might have been a nurse, they might have been all kinds of things, and they've
Oh,
just found a
brilliant.
way to kind of boost their future income a little bit. So
Yeah.
yeah, there are big investment companies out there, but actually the ones that you guys can build relationships with, small scale property investors who are available everywhere, who are just looking to sort of boost their income a little bit.
Yeah, I love that. That's again like community building as well. And it's also insightful. This is for even for individuals who may also be thinking about investing, because a lot of times most people don't even think about investments as they get older,
No.
especially things to add to their pensions or to help them well, later in life, really. So it's good to know that, also hear from yourself. I don't want to use the word regular Joe, but
But
just
it
anybody
is,
who,
yeah,
if you're
yeah,
interested in investing, anyone could literally be an investor in the sector. So that's
yeah.
to service providers looking to rent to rents, and also what are the advantages and disadvantages of rent to rent properties.
I could talk for about 3 hours on this bit, Obi. So,
It's a
I think
problem.
from trying to find providers, trying to find properties, it is a real challenge, and that's what I get approached with all the time. That's the reason I set the network up, was because I just got
Okay.
inundated with messages. Really, I think
Yes.
it's about building
Imagine.
relationships with people. I think it's having your pitch, understanding how to communicate your offering, and being clear on what it is that you want. So working out really early on what kind of property it is that you need to lease, being able to communicate that with a property investor, and being able to communicate really clearly what you do and don't want. So you need a 2-bed detached bungalow, but being clearer than that, that 2-bed detached bungalow needs to be not on a busy road, but near a bus stop so your staff could get there, but actually not near a pub because you don't want the noise at throwing out time. Not that there's throwing out time so much anymore, but that kind of thing. Being
Yeah.
really clear cut on the properties that you need, because it makes it easier for you to communicate with those property investors. So I think, there's lots.
Okay.
I've got a free guide on my website as well. We can put the link in the show notes if it's useful, that people can download to help you
Absolutely.
find properties, because I get asked it so much. I wrote it all out because it's just easier rather than me
Yeah.
saying it all the time. As for the pros and cons of renting and not renting, I mean, it depends on the sector that you're in, and that will make a difference. But I think it can help you grow quickly if you're a provider and you're looking to deliver your, grow your service. You're not
Yeah.
having to buy those properties, you can lease those properties. If you're delivering a service maybe to homeless people or veterans, or somewhere where the funding comes and goes a little bit more, then actually being able to lease properties means that you can then hand them back when that funding goes. Quite often we see big pots of money being handed out for 2 years for short-term interventions.
Yeah.
So for a lot of those support providers, leasing a property is the best way to go, because you don't know whether you have that long term, that income's going to carry on coming forward. The negatives are, you need to make sure your lease is written right to protect you and your tenants.
Absolutely.
And if it's not written correctly, then obviously you're at risk of being evicted, at times when you might have really settled tenants, your service might be going really well, and then that your landlord might give you notice. So you need to make sure your lease is written to protect you, to stop that from happening as much as you can.
That's key, because we have a client who's currently facing that. So for an issue like that, do you support with things like that, or can you signpost supported living providers who are currently having that issue because they are out there?
Yeah, absolutely. It's something we do come across. And so it's about making sure, often, it's actually, why are they selling that property? Are they selling that property because they need the money from that property and they're just selling the property? That's why they've given notice. If that's the case, then actually, have I got a property investor who could buy that property for you, and you could continue your service and carry on without any disruption in that service? So that's another thing to think about, is why are they giving notice? A lot of the times it's because the landlord's selling the property. And if that's the case, then say, let me try and find someone better to buy that property for you, and then your service isn't disrupted. But then it's also about making sure you're working with expert legal advice, so you're getting the leases written by someone who's writing these leases all the time. There's no good going
Absolutely.
to someone who has written one in the last 10 years. You need someone who is doing this all the time.
Yeah, and it's actually key. Lots of providers skip this step, but it's key, because continuity of care, this is further down the line when you start facing this problem, it causes more problems for you. So it's best to get this right at the beginning so you don't have this problem further down the line.
And it seems expensive, doesn't it, when you're having to pay to have a lease written that's
Yeah.
right for you? That first lease seems expensive, but actually, as you said, you will really thank yourself in the future that you've got it written right for you.
Absolutely. Are there any other common queries you receive regarding property leasing and connecting with landlords from service providers needing supported living? I know you said there's so much we can talk about in this area, but and we've
Yeah.
mentioned the contract, securing a good contract. But apart from that, what other issues could potential service providers or investors coming into the sector be aware of?
Rent's always a big issue. Getting the rents
Okay.
right, that's always a challenge. And trying to get that rent level at the right level where it's going to be enticing enough for the property investor to want to lease to you. Because you
Yep.
have to remember that property investor may have additional costs if they're leasing
Yes.
property to you. Their mortgage might be higher, their insurance might be higher, so they may need a little bit more money. That might not be them just being greedy, it might actually be that their costs are higher. But how do you get that rent right so that you're not paying too much rent that actually you realize you can't contain your service, you can't continue that service? So that's a real challenge. And then we have a lot of issues around finding housing associations to work with if you're a care provider.
Huge issue.
And that can be really challenging, finding the right housing association to partner with you to lease the property so that you're demonstrating that separation of care and
Yes.
tenancy that CQC want. And we're seeing, particularly if you're doing individual schemes, you know, single person homes, we're seeing a lot of the housing associations reluctant to lease those properties at the moment. It's something I'm flagging at quite high levels within lots of organisations, because I think it's a big issue, and I think it affects you know, what's going on the ground at the moment, being able to deliver good service. But so yeah, I think housing associations and rents, I would say, are the next sort of step down ones that I get asked all the time. Leases, finding the property, and then how to communicate with property investors. I spend a lot of time educating both sides, because I feel like you guys speak different languages, and sometimes you have a property investor who speaks property speak, and you've got a provider who speaks provider speak, and sometimes you put them in a room and they can't actually communicate and work out a heads of terms and a lease and the rent and everything else. So I spend quite a lot of time educating both sides so that everyone can talk to each other better, because I just think it's what's needed, really.
Oh, awesome. So if the provider out there requires this education, how can they reach you?
On my website, I've got a whole load of information there's lots of free information on my website as well. I know we were going to talk about my website later, so I don't want to jump ahead.
Okay, yes. So venturing into the supported living space can be exciting, but there are legal considerations. So what legal business structures are typically used for providing supported living services and for property investments? Are there any specific regulations or licensing requirements that individuals or companies need to be aware of before they start out?
Yeah, there are, and there's lots of different regulations. You're party to loads of their own ones as a provider, but then there's a whole load of property regulations that you may, if you're taking on that landlord role and you're not working with a housing association, then you're also party to all of those landlord regulations as well. There's pages and pages of things there that you would need to be aware of. I think the key ones are, if you're doing shared houses, to make sure that you're HMO compliant, that you have an HMO license. That's a house of multiple occupancy, and that's when you've got shared people sharing, you know, a group of people sharing a house. There's a whole load of regulations around the size of the bedrooms, the fire doors, the kitchens. It's very clearly laid out, and those guidance will be local to the areas that you're in. So it's about understanding what the local HMO guidance are for where this property is. As for the business structures, there's a whole range of different business structures you can get involved in, and it depends on what you are trying to achieve. I think if you're trying to set up your own sort of housing association, which is going to be leasing the property, and you want to be able to claim enhanced housing benefit, then that needs to be a not-for-profit vehicle. So it needs to be a charity, but that's very hard to set up a charity. So most people set up a CIC, a KIC, a community interest company, and that often is the vehicle that people will use to lease the properties if they haven't got a housing association to partner with. So sometimes you'll look at that, but again, it's such a bespoke question. It's one of those things that you need to get good legal advice, good accountancy advice, and make sure that you're choosing the vehicle that's right for you, your organisation, and where you're looking to grow to, sort of thinking a few steps ahead in the future as well as what you need today.
So this is important once you identify what you actually want to do. Do you want to partner with a housing association? Do you not? Do you want to rent privately? Do you want to rent commercially? So whatever it is you want to use a property for will determine the legal structure of it.
That's right. Yeah.
Brilliant.
Yeah. It's about getting good advice around that as well.
Yes, good consulting as well. So with regards to the HMO, just to be clear, because you mentioned it's a group of people that live together. So a group is how many?
It's normally 3 or more unrelated people, but it's look at the definitions exactly as to what it means for your tenant group, for the area that you're in, the type of property, and be really clear about it. It gets very confusing when you maybe have little studios, but there might be a shared kitchen. Is that an HMO or are they separate? You know, so it's being really, really clear about finding out that guidance locally about what that is seen to be. But it's normally about a group of unrelated individuals living together.
Yeah, and these guidelines are usually found on the local authorities' websites?
Yeah, the HMO guidance should be on the local authority website. There will be an HMO officer as well that you can contact, and some are more approachable than others, but they should be able
As usual.
but they should be someone that you can pick up the phone to and ask and just say, look, I'm looking at this property. Does it have an HMO license already? You should be able to see the HMO license already. But if it doesn't, just be clear whether it does need one or not, and whether you as the provider need to have that HMO license or the landlord, because again, that varies slightly from area to area about the guidance with that. Normally it would be the provider who would have the license because they're the one supporting the tenants, but it does vary a little bit. So all of those things you need to be clear about, before you sign that lease on that property, really.
Absolutely. Before you sign the lease on the property, key. Yes. Lisa, you're giving us some gems today. This is brilliant.
Good.
Yes, thank you. So you recently launched a new website for the Supported Living Property Network. Could you tell us more about the resources available on the website and how they support individuals interested in supported living property?
Yeah, I got asked so much by people the questions, and I just felt like my social media inboxes, my mail inbox was just full of all the same questions. So I've tried to create a one-stop shop resource for people. So there's a whole load of free
Amazing.
information. It's on supportedlivingproperty.uk. It's all there. And you can find there's loads of free information. There's blog articles, there's my own podcast and YouTube channel. And there's a whole load of there's guides that you can download as well. So like I mentioned earlier, there's a guide there to help providers find property, go step by step through all the processes. And then there's also the information about, the network that I've set up and the community that we have there, and also the training courses that I offer. So all of that information is there, but there's a lot of free information, and you can just sign up for my newsletter. You get a free weekly newsletter, which is full of information as well. So
Brilliant. And all of this information is going to be provided in the description box. So
wonderful. Thank you.
thank you as well. So can you tell us more about the community you've been able to create? I was going to say, how do we join your community? So if myself looking to increase my financial portfolio for the future, if I wanted to join your network, how could a property investor, someone like myself, how can we join the community that you've been able to create, and what is the impact it's had to those who are already involved?
So it's interesting, isn't it? I wanted to set up something different that worked in a completely different way, and there's lots of people who are sourcing, so they will charge you an expensive fee to get you a property, or if you're a property investor, charge you a fee to introduce you to a supported living provider.
Yes.
And I felt that didn't always work, and I didn't think it was always in everyone's best interest. So what I've done is set up a community which works in a very different way. So everybody comes in together. So we have providers and property investors. Everybody's a member together. And so you can go, actually, as a provider, you can join and go, I really need a 2-bed house in Leeds. And we might go, oh, do you know what? There's a property investor there who's got a 2-bed house in Leeds. Or actually, that property investor, he normally buys in Leeds. Why don't you have a conversation with him and see whether he could buy something for you?
Absolutely fantastic.
So it works in a really different way. And then as I thought about it, I was like, well, what do people need? They need access to education so that they can have better conversations and we can raise the standards of the property that's being created. So we have monthly training and we have monthly online networking so that people can connect with each other. And it's online, so it's really easy. No one needs to travel, but we break into breakout rooms around the country. So if you're in the Northwest, you can meet with providers and property investors in the Northwest and just chat to them and connect with them. And then we have a conference as well. We had one in May, which just passed the one we had a few weeks ago. And it was brilliant having experts in the room, and we had we're being recognised more and more, and the impact is amazing to see. So, we had the head of NHS housing for learning disabilities and autism was there in the room. Fantastic. Talking about, what's happening from their point of view, from a strategic level. So we're kind of getting involved in influencing policy a little bit and being strategic about stuff, which is what I'd always wanted this to be. When we can demonstrate we have this body of people who are all really interested in this, we can start then saying, well, what we really need is better mortgages, better insurance products. And we can say, we've got this volume of people, why do you not have this here to make everyone's life easier? So we're beginning to see some amazing impact, as well as the homes that are being created. And that's obviously the best bit of it from me. Hearing these stories directly of people who have been in hospital for a long time and they've actually managed to come out of hospital into their own homes. And that's out of the connections people have made from the network. Well, that's just amazing, isn't it? It's all round brilliant. So yeah, I love it. Absolutely love it.
It sounds like you're doing great work. And from the top of my head, I know quite a few providers that I'm going to be sending this to, because they do need to join the network because they've dealt with sources, and there's nothing wrong with sources.
If they're good sources, it's hard
Yeah,
work thing, but there's a lot of bad sources out there. That's the
I
problem.
agree. I totally agree. And if it's either the property that they've paid for doesn't meet standards,
Mm.
yes, or they just don't have the property and they say they do. So there's so many
Oh,
issues in that
yeah.
space. So this is very exciting. So
I just feel like there's a much better relation if you can build that relationship directly with somebody. You can meet that property investor. You know straight
yeah,
away that actually you don't really like them or you can't see yourself working with them. You don't waste any more time. Do you see? Whereas if
yes,
you're working between a sourcer who then introduces you to that property investor and you've paid all
yes.
that money, and then actually you decide you don't really like them or don't think you trust them to look after, it doesn't, and that goes both ways for the property investors too, meeting the providers. It's got to be a relationship that works for both parties, hasn't it? So building that direct relationship is really key.
Brilliant, brilliant thing you've done, and I wish you all the best in that.
Thank
Speaking about recognition, you're currently nominated for 2 awards, the
you.
Property Paragon Award and the Property Community of the Year Award. So we want to say a big congratulations.
Oh, thank you.
So apart from being able to influence policy, like you mentioned, which I think is absolutely fantastic because you're doing great work in the sector and you have the best interest of the individuals, the citizens who use supported living and the service providers. So I do believe, as someone who is also in the sector, I do believe that you're very well placed to actually speak on policies and to let the decision makers and strategic leads know that this is something that is needed because you're in it, you work with the end users. So I'm just pleased that you're actually able to do that. But what does it mean to you to be nominated for this award?
Oh, it was really lovely to be put forward for it. It puts me outside my comfort zone completely because I don't like talking. And then now I've got to put on a posh frock and go up to the award ceremony. But
I totally understand.
but it's a really lovely thing to be recognised for it, and it's the property community one that I'm most excited about because it kind of recognises the work that everyone within the network is doing together, and so to me that's the one that's really, really special. But we'll see what happens. The thing is, there's so many other amazing people being put forward for these awards, so whoever wins them, it'll be brilliant. So yeah.
Well, Lisa, we are rooting for you.
Oh, thank you, Opie. Thank you.
Okay, so this brings us to the end. So to wrap things up on a lighter note, do you have any parting advice to our listeners, perhaps some words of wisdom for those interested in getting involved in supported living? Yeah, so what would you like to say?
I think we touched on it at the beginning, but it's all about relationships. It's all about building relationships with people, taking that time. And it doesn't happen overnight. I speak to some people. I had someone recently, they joined the network. They were a member for 2 weeks. They hadn't found their perfect property and they wanted to leave. Well, you can leave. You're not tied in. But I was like, it takes time. You've got to build those relationships. You've got to invest in those relationships to get more out of it. So I think it's about, it's that old saying, isn't it? Business is a people thing, people business, and it is. Any business is people. And so taking that time to build relationships, get to know people and learn what it is you're putting forward and put forward what it is and sell yourself. It's all about being able to promote what you're doing and share that with other people.
Fantastic. It's been such a joy to have you, Lisa. And hopefully, once you've won your award and once you've influenced more policies and you've made even more amazing changes in the sector, we can have you back and have another conversation about where you are. So thank you so much.
I look forward to that. Thank you, Ovie. Thank you.